Congress. And do you feel that sanctuary cities should be denied federal funding?
I think so.
Do you think there's a possibility
What was the
that
question to accomplish that?
If we change the president, I don't know. I mean, I had some real struggles last year working with immigration. We had some issues with leadership that with some of those. I mean, I was one of the original folks on 1804. There were 5 bills that were combined into our immigration legislation, and this past year, because there were some differences with personalities and the speaker, basically all the immigration bills were shut down. They were shut out, and we were just going to run one bill out of the House. We created a joint committee for immigration of Senate and House, and I was chair of the House side. And we were tasked with looking at all the bills, trying to find some real reform to the current laws that we could make and that we could pass to help. And so we had several open meetings. Quite honestly, I think the makeup of the committee was stacked against me. As far as, I think it was too many folks that may have had lesser views on immigration. We had some open meetings, and through the course of the meetings we found out that 1804 could work, but law enforcement were either unfamiliar with how they could enforce federal law or unwilling because maybe the local cities weren't doing anything about it. And we had a lot of pressure from the state chambers to not do something anti-business friendly. And I realized real quickly that we weren't going to be able to pass a big comprehensive law that dealt with a lot of issues. So I looked at, and one of the most stirring statements we had was from the Bureau of Narcotics Director, Darrell Weaver. In one of our meetings, he said the worst problem that they have right now is with illegals and drug running. In fact, after Arizona passed their legislation, they captured a guy in Oklahoma City, and after interrogating him, he said he was told as soon as Arizona law passed to go to Oklahoma City, go to Oklahoma and set up shop. So I realized that we had an issue with law enforcement not having the tools necessary to enforce law. So we decided to narrow the focus of the immigration legislation to public safety. We had the Attorney General, we had the Bureau of Narcotics, we had the Highway Patrol, we had the Governor's Office, we had the House and Senate members, and we had some extensive meetings across, and we came up with some real issues to address public safety. Part of the problem is human smuggling. Okay, so we have a human trafficking law in the books. We put a human smuggling law in this legislation. We gave the Bureau of Narcotics the lead investigative agent to enforce that. And I know that we're going into a lot of detail, but it was pretty complex. So we put that in there to stop the human smuggling. The Attorney General wanted to go after those folks who put themselves out as an immigration attorney and lure people and take their money when they're not an attorney. They needed to be able to enforce that and to prosecute those individuals. That was another portion of it. The other aspect that we found when we had conversations with law enforcement and with the Tulsa County Sheriff, they were very instrumental because they've got a huge immigration program, the 287G. People don't want to come forward and testify. If they're illegal and they've had crimes committed against themselves, they don't want to come forward. So there was a provision under the human sex trafficking that if someone came forward to testify, they would be able to have an application that would be signed by whatever law enforcement that they could turn into the federal government, not granting, but basically saying this individual is helping with information to prosecute someone committing a crime. And if they submitted that to the federal government, showing that they were cooperating, they could receive a temporary only status of 3 years to be in the country. How are you going to prosecute folks if no one comes and testifies against them? So that was another provision of it. Another larger provision was for CLEAT. That's the training arm of law enforcement. For them to provide training, classes, information to recruits and the retraining classes for folks to find out how they can enforce law, immigration law. Otherwise, if they don't know how to do it, they just weren't enforcing it. And then we had a provision that if someone was stopped, and let's say they didn't have a valid driver's license, they're going to jail. Okay? That's just going to jail. Currently, if they were stopped because of a DUI or a felony, then they had to make a reasonable check into their immigration status. This took that away. If you were stopped and detained, they had to find out if you were here legally. Those were the provisions of the bill. But what happened because of the friction between the speaker and some individuals, they took the victim portion of that, where someone would be testifying, and they called it amnesty. We're giving amnesty to everybody. And the bill was defeated on the House side. We had some really good reform measures that would have given local law enforcement the tools, because down in this area I talked to several sheriffs that try to enforce law, but they're told by their city manager and they're told by the sheriff, you just turn a blind eye and stop bringing these folks in. And they're created sanctuary cities. And that's happening. I've got a couple of folks that we were in conversation with, and they were telling me this is what they're facing. So until we can secure the borders and stop that, and then work with who we've got caught here.
I mean, but to stop the border in there, huh?
So I think it's going to be a long road, because people are going to, the economic side of it is going to come into play, and we've got to fight that. We honestly couldn't get enough people to come that were going to be stiffer immigration. We had all the other sides coming as far as to the open meetings, but you know.
Well, and
I'm told that Oklahoma is now the crossroads for Mexico and their drugs.
I think it is because I-40, I-35,
Yes.
all the main roads, and it's just a highway coming through here.
Okay.
It's Middle East, I mean, it's South America.
Yeah, it's not just
like a lot of people think
Hispanic.
it's just Hispanic, but
No,
I mean, we're getting
it's all the way
Russians.
down.
Right.
Russians are coming through.
Right.
Several ethnic groups. I mean,
Yeah.
I think the Tulsa County Sheriff said there are 39 different ethnic groups that they've had immigration issues with, and they are the second largest 287G detention facility in the country. In fact, they're thinking of moving the immigration court to Tulsa, which would be huge.
Yeah, but they want you to think as Hispanic, and then they
Yeah.
want you to think that
Well, they
you're-
want to create
you're-
that friction
They want that
within the
friction
culture.
and stuff, right?
Yeah.
In the culture.
I didn't understand when you said leadership personality between the speaker and the other person. Was the speaker in favor of your bill?
The speaker was in favor of my bill. There were some folks that, because their name wasn't on the immigration bill, didn't like that. And there were some other issues of actions that are being investigated right now. And they felt shut out of the process because all the other bills
You're
were
talking about
killed.
Randy Terrell.
Who?
Well, why didn't
Randy
you just
Farrell.
jump on the bandwagon?
You know,
Wait, who is Randy
So-
Terrell? Is he the speaker?
No,
No.
no.
But it was
Chris
unfortunate.
Steele.
It was unfortunate how that whole deal,
Okay.
happened. I was.
Randy Terrell has had the other immigration bills that didn't
Yes.
pass.
And I worked with Randy Terrell in H before, and quite honestly, we thought he should have run something that was a speaker decision.
But see, the federal government ICE will not enforce it. If they arrest them down here, I know, then ICE will come and get them.
Yeah, I think
So,
the sanctuary cities is probably something we need to deal with on a state level, and we need to continue to push for that. You're going to bump up against the economic folks, and we've got to be able to convince them that this is good. There are ways for folks who are here illegally, go back home, come back legally, and we've got to convince them that they need to do that. But there's so many employers who are doing this under the radar, and they're not being held accountable. And I would have liked to have gone that direction, but I knew that I wouldn't be able to do it with the joint committee. I think there's going to be some legislation. There's an interim study that will do that. It's looking at the employer verification part. So we need to try to attack it, maybe piecemeal it,